Well, one of the things I've heard it on our way in here, and everywhere you go, the scene that everybody is so impressed by, I mean, there are many, but the one that stands out in people's minds is the telephone scene. And I was thinking that, I just remember studying film in school, and one of the most celebrated scenes in film history, Louise Reiner in The Great Ziegfeld. We're going way back now, this is 73 years ago, but the camera stays on her, you don't see the other guy on the other end of the phone, but she receives some devastating news, and you see her crumble. And so many people over these ensuing 73 years, so many people I think have tried to replicate the power of that scene. Very, very few have managed to come even close. I think you guys really pulled it off. That scene in particular, did you and Tom map it out? Was it just something, the camera's there, you do what you want, or
camera's there, do what you want? And that actually, it sounds almost contradictory to say it, but that is the power of a wonderful director. I think there are some directors think that in order to be a wonderful director, I have to have put my directing stamp on this. I have to have shown, where he did what and what. That isn't wonderful directing. I mean, occasionally you do meet a guy who's a maestro of managing the details. Right. But on the whole, setting up a structure and a tone in which everything can flourish, and then letting people go, is a perfect cocktail. And that was about 9 o'clock at night. People were a little distracted. We didn't know each other very well. I mean, we didn't know each other very well by the end of this film, really, but because it was so short. Right. But it was election night. And so, the people were listening to, they had little portable TV things, and we were getting updates. And the moment in which I had to shoot that scene was the moment in which it became official, I think, in California. It was around 9 o'clock at night. Well, that's when we got the news anyway. Someone held up a little thing saying Barack Obama president-elect. Wow. Now, I was not unhappy about it at all. And in fact, it felt rather special to be in this country at a moment when something so important was happening. Despite Prop 8 also happening in California the same night, which was a bizarre irony. Yeah. But anyway, this was extraordinary, and we didn't know each other well enough to, high-five each other and whoop, or, we weren't even completely convinced of each other's politics. Right. And it was a quiet and somber scene. I didn't think there was going to be as much to it as there was. All I read was the dialogue. And then the sound guy took his cans off and played McCain's concession speech sometime while I was sitting on that armchair. And I wanted to punch the air. And instead I had to cry. No, Tom just let it happen. They got out of the way. The camera operator, the focus puller, and the boom operator were in the room. And everybody else was in the next room around a monitor. And Tom just said action. And then he didn't cut until the magazine rolled out.
So we're talking after you've hung up the phone, after you've had emotionally you go through so much, and that's just in your face in that scene. Was it like, we're talking 11 minutes or something after that? Were you kind of like thinking to yourself, what the heck's going on here, or you were just staying in the...
There's always a conscious part of you. Stanislavski, I think it was Stanislavski, used to call it the third eye. However immersed you are in your role, there has to be a conscious part of you that's judging it, monitoring the critic, saying too much, too little, pull back, cut. That part of me was awake enough to say, this has been going on a heck of a long time. He hasn't said cut. But then, that was a nanosecond really. And then I thought, okay, you're free.
You've talked about the selection of the clothes on the last day of, he wakes up, this is going to be the last day of his life, and he still selects his clothes. There's significance to those and to the decision, I think, and maybe you can talk about why that.
I think George's clothes are mostly identical. I think he, as Tom said, I think he has enough of a private income to get him the house, the car, and the suits that he wants, and he uses them as protection. I think that he probably has 10 or so identical shirts. I think he has 3 or 4 fairly identical suits, and he knows where he gets them cleaned and pressed, and that's his body armour, probably for every day of his life. This is very much, I think, Tom's stamp on the character. we all have ways of protecting ourselves and arming ourselves against the world, we would like to. And Tom's is that kind of exterior fastidiousness, and so that was Tom's conceit.
One other just interesting choice with this movie, which was I guess his, or it could have been a joint decision, was to do these voiceovers, which are almost like the dead man talking in a way, like a Sunset Boulevard or something, where you're, and how'd you approach that? Was that something?
Well, that wasn't, we didn't have that when we shot it. It wasn't in the script.
Really?
No. And so Tom, I feel, wrote them based on what he saw when we'd done it. And when we came to do the ADR, and there was very, very little. In fact, one of the only lines he told me to do again was one line where he just thought I sounded a little gay. I'm not going to tell you what it is because people look out for those things, but he just thought, no, you sound camp.
Interesting.
You know, and I didn't mean to sound camp. I was just, you know, that's just me.
It's just like,
well, I have a little bit of a tendency to sound camp anyway. No, he just said, don't do that. It just sounded a little kind of fruity. But there was very little. As I said, he wasn't a very controlling director, and he just had this thing written, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. It takes time in the morning to become George. The Ammon now came from Isherwood. Those were the first words that were here. And then the film got put together, and then the last voiceover came much later, when he'd cut the film together, and he wrote it, and I thought it was just gorgeous. It was, and I wanted to speak those words as if there was somebody right next to me, not like an, you know, it was really, I felt they needed to be spoken intimately. It's an odd idea, you know, this idea that you have, you know, George's soul having died, you know.
And a lot of movies, it would seem campy, but it works, I think.
I just think it's, with the way Tom wrote it, it was just very personal.
The only criticism that I've heard that I think brings up one good point is, not a good point, but a question, a good question, is even in the 1960s, when maybe things were more, you know, dignified, or people dressed better or whatever than today, is it believable that everybody in this movie, everybody's so good looking, everything is so beautiful, everything is, you know, do you feel that, how can we respond to that question when people raise that?
Alright, I'm going to come up with maybe a slightly clever answer. But I think we can defend it, George's fastidiousness and his need for beauty, his need for perfection, his need to dress well. But why does every college student and every professor and every hustler outside the liquor store have to look
That's right.
Well, alright, my defense of that would be, apart from the fact that I think Tom's sensibility can't tolerate that, it's through George's eyes. This is his last day. That life is looking, the heightened effect. In a way, the villain of the piece is life and beauty. There's no villain in this story.
Yeah.
Normally, you know, the hero wants to survive, and death is the enemy, and demise is the enemy. In this case, it's the other way around. The hero wants to die, and all the valuable and beautiful and gorgeous things about life are conspiring to come back and call him back to life. So I think this is life through George's eyes. This is not life as it's real. I think, you know, John Cotaharena, who plays the hustler, he is the most beautiful human being you've ever seen. Most hustlers wouldn't look like that. He would still be hustling. But I think this is the way George sees him. And probably the guy doesn't really look like that. And if you were to take, even Tom, were to make this film on any other day in George's life, you'd cast a very ordinary looking actor. It's just that today, through George's eyes, life is all too beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.